Hey everyone. A lot of information has come out about Fallout 76. I wanted to try to compile everything that we know about the game so far into one huge video. Most of the information I talk about comes from the NoClip documentary, The Making of Fallout 76. There are also a few other details that come from the interviews surrounding E3. Before I start this video, I just want to say that you can get a link to the full documentary in the description. It's really great and definitely worth watching. Now I'd like to do a little explanation on the three sections of this video. The first section will be general information. This category will have things like development information, the history of Fallout 76, and design philosophy. It will also talk a little bit about the developers who worked on the game. It also has a lot of information on the game world itself and what kind of flora and fauna you'll encounter along the way. The second section is gameplay. This is the section that many of you will want to hear about the most, so I'll go ahead and include a timestamp for people who want to jump straight into hearing details about the game itself. This section will revolve primarily around specific game mechanics and systems. Finally, we'll have a very small post-launch section based on the limited info we have from the NoClip doc. On top of that, I'll also include a few random facts that I heard from interviews during E3 with Todd Howard and Pete Hines. Bethesda Game Studios now has 3 different locations. BGS Rockville, located in Maryland, is the original studio, responsible for the development of previous Fallout and Elder Scrolls games. BGS Montreal was acquired in 2015, marking the beginning of Bethesda's journey into being a multi-studio developer. BGS Austin, known formerly as Battlecry Studios, is the newest studio to join BGS, and they were known previously for working on Battlecry, a competitive multiplayer game. BGS Austin are the main guys behind Fallout 76. The Rockville studio is certainly involved, but they've been putting in tons of work into Starfield all this time as well, and 76 seems to be mostly Austin's baby after the initial design phase. Austin started working on 76 when they were still Battlecry Studios, during a time when Rockville was still working on Fallout 4, and later beginning production on Fallout 4 DLC and Starfield. The documentary makes it sound like Rockville's involvement is largely creative, and focused on design aspects that they know well, with Austin using their knowledge of multiplayer games to really bring this vision to life on the technical side of things. All post-launch support will be done entirely by BGS Austin, though you'll hear a little more about that in the post-launch section. The 2 Fallout 76 leads worked on Ultima Online, Star Wars Galaxies, and the Old Republic between them both. The lead programmer for 76 was the client lead for Star Wars Galaxies. They're experts when it comes to building multiplayer, and painstakingly rebuilt the engine from the ground up to support multiplayer. BGS Austin was absolutely crucial in the development of this game. Rockville doesn't have the experience required to pull something like this off because they're a single-player focused studio. From the beginning, the map was planned to be 4 times bigger than Fallout 4. This is in part due to new tech that enabled them to render longer distances. They wanted lots of open space to explore. West Virginia was chosen because A, it was still the East Coast, and B, it was a place that was almost completely untouched by nukes. This would give them the opportunity to have living forests, tons of different types of wildlife, and more diversity than usual when it comes to different regions on the map. It was also chosen because, as they dug deeper into local stories and folklore of West Virginia, they found out that there were so many cool conspiracy theories, monsters, and creatures that have been part of the state's history. They felt that it was a perfect match for Fallout 76. The Grafton Monster, the Flatwood Monster, the Snallygaster, the Mothman. The list goes on. The Mothman specifically is a unique creature that they don't want to spoil, other than saying that there will be stages to him. A direct quote from them is, "Maybe at the beginning, he's just stalking you. Creepy." There are way more creatures in 76 than all other Fallout games. Giant sloths, 2-headed possums, and intelligent plants were all mentioned in the documentary. The mutated creatures are more dramatic because it's so soon after the bombs fell, and the radiation is at its most powerful. They like to think that not all of these creatures were able to survive into the time period when the other Fallout games are set, because those mutations are so much more dramatic. Raiders are out. The important reason for this is that they found with raiders, players would spend a lot of time just trying to discern whether or not a hostile human was a player or AI. They didn't want this, so they created a faction of half-feral ghouls called the Scorched, who are hostile but still sane enough to be able to use weapons and armor. This will be the faction that provides the main AI gun combat in the game, which is described as a central pillar of the Fallout experience. Raiders were also incompatible with the game's story. For Fallout 76, every ordinary human is meant to be a player. Adding non-player humans as raiders would only go against this vision. The map is huge, but there are 6 distinct regions to the game that each have a different difficulty and level for a natural progression. They mentioned, and I quote, a hollowed-out mountaintop, soggy floodlands, a festering toxic wasteland, swampy woods, and a colossal mountain range that bisects the entire map. The new weather system can encourage or deter you from entering a specific area. Maybe you want to head through the mountains, but a major radstorm is sweeping through the area right now, making it much more dangerous to do so. There's a lot of open space in this map. This means that when you find something, they want it to feel like you're finding something that's been hidden from the world for a long time. There are tons of different places to find. Some of the ones they mentioned were everything from quiet cabins, abandoned wood mills, treetop watchtowers, to flooded mines and abandoned barbecue joints. This is of course in addition to the fact that you will find whole abandoned cities and towns, just like previous Fallout games. There are missile silos and even a crashed space station. Fans who know Van Buren, the cancelled Fallout game by Interplay, should really be happy about the space station. The world is larger and more detailed than any previous game. This is due to massive engine improvements. New systems for propagating forests, a vastly improved dynamic lighting model, subsurface scattering, and far more complex animations for creatures who need to react to being attacked by multiple players at once. You'll start the game in a relatively nice green area. Another more hostile area that they showed is a region full of factories that's covered in a nasty white powder from all the chemicals that the factories were full of being released when the bombs fell. There are lots of vertical landmarks. The giant excavator shown in the trailer was shown here in the documentary when they were talking about it. They let you orient yourself easily. In general, there's more verticality than previous games, since Fallout 3 and 4 were both very flat-landed areas. They have their version of the Greenbrier Hotel, which housed a real-life nuclear bunker. Their vision has a large golf course connected to it, and it has its own story which they don't want to spoil quite yet. There's more clothing than ever, and you have to discover a lot of it in specific spots. An example that they give is that there's a real-life town called Helvetia that appears in the game, which is home to a festival where they make papier-mâché masks. They made 10 of them for you to find while you visit the town in Fallout 76. A lot of stories and quests you'll find will be the locational stories that we see as unmarked quests in previous Fallout games. An example given is a firehouse in Charleston, and if you go there, you can find firefighter gear and take a firefighter training course. They want you to explore and discover these things for yourself, along with your friends. Getting into gameplay, I want to lead with something very important. You can play solo, but at launch there will be no private maps. They fully believe in the idea of sharing a world with other players for Fallout 76. Private lobbies with full mod support will come sometime after launch. Todd Howard has explicitly confirmed in no uncertain terms that they are 100% committed to mods for Fallout 76. Now, there is a main story and there are plenty of quests, but they also want this game to be about what you want to do on any given day. Maybe you want to explore a new region, or maybe you want to go hunt down that last rare component for a crafting project. Maybe you want to kill a creature for its drops, or maybe you just want to set up a new camp. There are also events for you to join in on. An example given was a horde of super mutants attacking a farm. You get notified and can swoop in to save the day, and they want you to meet other players doing the same thing. You don't know what's going to happen, and they're okay with that. An example given was maybe you see 10 Yao Guai come in because someone trained them in from across the map. It gets crazy. Your camp is your portable build-anywhere settlement. They're smaller than a full settlement, but can be placed anywhere on the map. If you join a new game, your camp will automatically be where you left it. If by some miracle, 2 people have their camps in the exact same spot, and they stress that this is very unlikely due to a player limit of 20 to 30 on an enormous map, your camp will be saved as a blueprint, and you can put it down anywhere you want. This save and load system also makes it easy to repair any damage to your settlement in the case of hostilities with wasteland creatures or even other players. In addition to the camps you can build anywhere, there's also public workshops that must be claimed. These are specific locations that you have to clear out, and once you take them, there could be events there that spawn. But they can also contain useful crafting resources. One example they give in the documentary is a mine that, once claimed, allows you to get a regular income of lead ore. Lead equals bullets. Being able to make your own bullets is very valuable in Fallout and potentially valuable to other players. There are certain restrictions on where you can place your camp, but you can place them almost anywhere. One example given of one of those restrictions is that you can't place a camp right outside of Vault 76 because they don't want you to grief brand new players. Crafting is a big part of the game. You'll be able to craft guns, mods, ammo, food, armor, power armor, etc. Everything that you could craft in Fallout 4 and way more. They want you to always be hunting down rare materials to craft that next big item. They also talk about how they want survival elements to be a big part of the game, but never tedious or boring. One of the developers had this to say: "I have to brush my teeth every day or they'll rot out of my head, but I don't want to do that in a video game. I just don't care." I thought it was a good quote and wanted to include it directly. You do have to eat and drink to survive. One funny anecdote that they shared was that someone stumbled into a herd of cats, and they said that they'd never been happier to see cats because it meant that they could eat. Food rots over time, and your gear degrades and must be repaired. Now there's also rads. Rads are different in Fallout 76 and they cause mutations. The higher your rad count, the greater the odds that you'll get a mutation. They function a little bit like traits from Fallout 2, where you get a buff to one thing and a penalty to something else. They can be cured if you don't like them, and in the late game you can become permanently mutated if there's one that you really like. Most mutations are stat or gameplay changes, but some are visual or have some kind of visual effect on your character. You will be able to sell items you craft to other players. Crafting is a big part of the game, and they want crafting specialization to be worthwhile and powerful. You can spec into cooking and make valuable food that other players might be willing to pay for. They're exploring the idea of letting you set up a robot vendor in some kind of hub area so that you can sell items to other players who visit the hub. This is not confirmed, and they're still exploring the idea, but the person in the documentary reiterates that it's a live game and that they're always thinking long-term about what they can add. Moving on to skills, perk cards completely replace the perk chart system from Fallout 4. Every single time you level up, you take a new perk card. Perk cards are divided among the primary special attributes, and you can have a limited number active at any given time. You can swap your active cards out whenever you want, and you can even share some of their effects with other players in your group. This incentivizes coordination in groups, where you can specialize to work well when you're all grouped up and playing together. One person in your group might be focused on survival stuff like crafting and cooking. Somebody else might be geared up for combat. Another might be spec'd into building great defenses for your settlement, and the last might be built up as a medic to heal other players. For crafting, you find recipes all over the world to unlock new stuff to make. There are, and I quote, orders of magnitude more recipes in Fallout 76 than there are in Fallout 4, and a lot of the items that you craft are a plus and a minus. One food might make you more susceptible to disease, but give you a huge health buff. As far as social aspects go, there are anti-griefing measures in place. They don't want the game to be too chaotic. Aggressive players will get a wanted level, and the penalty for death is only respawning at a nearby location. They're still fine-tuning the other anti-griefing measures and aren't talking about them at this time, but you can relax knowing that they're not going to let players kill you over and over and over again. There are different ways to communicate with other players, including voice chat, an emote wheel, and even a photo mode that came out of a game jam. They want to know when to control the player, but more importantly, when not to control the player. They want this to feel like a Fallout game. The other players in the world are a system that they don't control, and they're not going to shy away from it. They embrace it. They said that when players collide, it might be messy for a bit, but they have levers in place to solve problems. They'd rather do that than play it safe. They really want to try this, and they can make adjustments later if they want to. As far as how many players are playing on the map at once, 24 to 32 players is their goal. It was challenging deciding on how many players would be in the game and how frequently they wanted players to bump into one another. They want meeting another player to feel special, so they didn't want it to happen too frequently. Players will be visible on the map at all times, in their words, for good or ill. They want you to be able to see other players doing an event or a quest and then go along to help them, or maybe even attack them. Though again, there are anti-griefing measures in place that they will tune as time goes on. They also revealed later that when you sneak, you don't appear on the map, so it gives you a way to sneak away or towards other players. When you meet a friendly player, you can trade items from your inventory with them. You can immediately join your friends in their session or invite them to yours. Party size is currently 4, though they said that that is easily adjustable. They're aiming for 4-person co-op gameplay, but they also want to have bigger conflicts, like 12v12 deathmatch. They're always working on adding more content to the game. Right now they're working on the aforementioned deathmatch mode for players who may complete every quest and still want something to do. Now let's talk about the nukes. Nukes. Nukes are endgame content that require you to play through the game's story and complete repeatable quests to find the launch codes. The story there is that the Scorch Beasts, the giant bats that we see in the trailer, are crawling up from massive holes in the ground, and you can use nuclear strikes to seal those fissures. Nukes are not a griefing device. Their function is to create high-level areas wherever you want on the map, and you are actively incentivized to do this in non-populated areas because you want to be the first one in there to plunder those areas. If you stay too long in them, you die. It is very challenging and time-consuming to obtain the code to actually launch a nuke. It requires playing through most, if not all, of the main story, and then completing a repeatable quest until you have every part of the code. Because of the opportunity this presents and the time investment, players aren't going to just be dropping nukes left and right on other players. By doing so, you will have effectively wasted your limited time reward by dropping a high-level, loot-rich area right on top of somebody else. The legendary item system returns, and places you nuke are excellent locations to farm legendary items. Eventually, the nuked area will return to its pre-nuked state. Depending on where you nuke, you'll find different things inhabiting the area, because different areas have different flora and fauna. You can nuke other players. Todd is very excited to see what people do with the nukes in general, because they just don't know what's going to happen. And finally, if your settlement is nuked, you can easily repair the damage using the save and load system from the camps. Again, nukes are not a griefing device. Pete Hines also mentioned in an E3 interview that if you're in an area that's about to be nuked, you'll get a warning and you'll have plenty of time to get out of there before the bomb drops. All DLC and updates for the game will be totally free for everybody. After Fallout 76 releases, the Rockville studio will remain creative leads of the project, but most of their work is still going to Starfield. BGS Montreal is also transitioning to Starfield. Austin will be in charge of supporting the game for years to come. I know this is contentious, but they acknowledge microtransactions as an unfortunate reality of supporting both dedicated servers and free post-launch content for everybody. Rest easy knowing that microtransactions are purely cosmetic. On top of that, anything that you can purchase with a microtransaction will also be able to be obtained for free just by playing the game. The plan is for part of the Austin team to be working on regular, smaller content updates, with the other part of the team working on larger content drops. So you get frequent, smaller updates. The two examples they gave were new events and free items, and then major content updates every so often. That's the plan, and they will have to make adjustments based on what players like and what they don't like. They also said that if they make something that they really like and the players just don't, that they're not going to double down on it. Instead, they'll embrace the stuff that players do like. Now, here are some notes that aren't from the documentary but have been mentioned in various interviews since E3. These pertain to some of the hot topics within the community, so I really want to get into this. You can quickly and easily repair damage if you are nuked or join another session. This, in addition to nukes being very hard to acquire and potentially valuable with their rewards, makes them pretty much impossible to grief with. You essentially have to complete hours of quests in order to use the nukes, and then the area that you nuke will only remain a high-level zone for a limited amount of time. This is described as being a way for the player to create their own endgame zone, and a mad dash to get as much as you can out of it before time is up or you die of exposure. VATS will return, and it functions in real time. You will have to be snappier about lining up your shots, but you can still build your character to specialize in VATS, and it's still great for players who maybe don't have great twitch aim and want to rely on their character's skill more than their own. Pete Hines has said that there are tons of quests scattered all over the world. I've also heard that Todd say that they will make use of robots a lot for quest givers. There will be dialogue and there will be things to do, so it's not just a purely sandbox experience the way that some people think it is. Mods and private lobbies are confirmed, but post-launch. Since Fallout 3, there's always a delay between the release of the game and official mod support, and 76 is no different. Their main focus on launch is to have the base game running as well as it can, and then sometimes later, they'll add private lobbies that can be modded just like every other Bethesda game. They said that they are 100% committed to this and that it is going to happen. I also want to touch on people who say that mod support could just be the Creation Club and why that is definitely not correct. Bethesda has always drawn a complete hard line in the sand between mods and the Creation Club, and have only ever used the word mod to refer to third-party, user-generated content. There's a really great GDC talk they did called How Modding Made Bethesda Better, where they talk more about this, and I'll put a link to that in the description. In short, Bethesda will never ever promise mod support only to release Creation Club content in its place, because the two are completely different things in their eyes, and in the eyes of the modding community at large. Now that's not to say that there won't be Creation Club content for 76, I expect that there probably will be, but it does mean that the Creation Club isn't replacing the mods we all know and love. Pete Hines also touched a little bit on PvP. We don't have concrete details yet, but he's made it clear that if a player has killed you, you won't have to keep battling them or putting up with them if you don't want to. He mentioned that it's sort of like stumbling upon a Deathclaw. A Deathclaw might kill you once, and you might try 5 times to kill it before giving up, but at any point you can go, okay, I don't want to fight this Deathclaw anymore, and go do something else. The way it sounds is that you'll be able to kill players maybe once or twice before some kind of anti-grief system kicks in and makes it so you have to opt in to continue fighting that player, but that is speculation on my part. That about does it for this video. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of thing. Robbie out!